Hey everybody, did you know that there are no muscles in your fingers? Your fingers are actually controlled by muscles in your palms and in your hands and in your wrists. That's a really weird thing. Welcome back to OHC Youth Live. All right, everybody. My name is Ryan Anfinite. I'm the youth pastor right here at Oak Haven Church here in Ham Lake, Minnesota. If you're one of us, if you're part of our group, thanks for joining in. If you're tuning in for the very first time, we're glad to have you with us. We pray that you find a place to connect with God at least a little bit tonight. Tonight we're starting a new series. Maybe you've had questions about who God is. Maybe you've had concerns or maybe even a little bit of doubt. Is God real? Did Jesus actually die? Does God even love me? What about the Bible? What's going on there? Well, we'll be starting a series tonight asking some of those questions about is it even okay to have doubts like that? But before we get into it, before we hit all the serious stuff, we have something really important to do. It's time for our bad joke of the day. Sorry. Putting a little boogie and it got me inspired. So you might be hearing these bad jokes and you might be asking, why, Ryan? Why do you do this to us? And I want to encourage you so that you know that that's a really good question. You should keep asking the question, why? From a very young age, all of us are curious. We begin asking why to every single thing. In fact, some of us ask why so often that we begin to annoy our parents. Here's a good example. Take a look.
Why?
Get up, girl.
Why?
It's daytime.
Not daytime, it's uptime.
Yeah, it's up time. You've got to brush your teeth.
Why?
Because you have morning breath.
Why?
Why what? No, kids can't have coffee.
Why?
Because coffee is for big people.
Why?
Because little kids can't drink it. It makes you too hyper.
Why make me too hyper? Give me a little bit.
No.
Why? Sound clothes?
Yeah.
Why?
Because we're going to a sand park and I don't want you to get sand in your butt.
Is that not my butt?
Yeah.
Why? I don't want to get dirty.
Nope.
Why?
I love it. Little kids are so funny. They just ask why to every single thing. They're curious. They're inquisitive. And sometimes we don't have all the right answers, right? No, I think this is true for a lot of different things. Being curious is natural. Asking questions is natural. And I think sometimes people run out of patience, especially in the church. I have a buddy who grew up in the church, and he grew up with that same inquisitive mind. He'd be asking questions. Well, why does God do this? Why does the Bible say that? Why do we do things in this way in the church? And people were usually happy to answer him until he started asking some tough questions. And then the answers to his questions changed. And he started hearing, "You ask too many questions. You should stop asking so many questions. You should have a little faith and just believe that this is the right thing." Now, I think if you're hearing it the same way I'm hearing it, that didn't go over so well. My friend wasn't happy to have the only answer he gets to some of his tough questions be, "You should just believe this because it's true," right? That's not a satisfying answer. That's not a helpful answer. And I want you to hear from me, I don't think those church people answered it in a very loving way. Because we don't have to have all the answers, right? But sometimes having the right question is the right thing. Now, maybe you've had this experience too. Maybe you've been told not to ask so many questions. Or maybe you've started to feel annoying or even guilty, especially when it comes to asking questions about your faith. Now, when people respond that way, when they make you feel guilty, when they say that you're asking too many questions, sometimes it's not because they're mad at you. Sometimes it's because they're concerned. They're worried that you're going down a path where you're turning away from God and you're asking questions that are going to lead you in the wrong direction. And that's a misguided thought. Because I believe when we ask questions about our faith, when we try and discover what God has for our lives and our hearts, really that's just our curiosity coming out again. It's us trying to discover what God has for us in our lives. So like that little girl Zoe, asking why is a healthy sign of curiosity. It's a sign that you want to grow and you want to learn. And so I have a really short exercise I want you to think about when it comes to doubting God. Is it okay to doubt God? And so here's the first scenario. Go ahead and respond in the chat with what you think. So let's say you have a big test coming up. And is it okay for you to doubt that God's going to help you study well and get through it? Is it okay to doubt that God's going to help you get through that test? So that's scenario number one. Here's number two. You have a big test coming up, so same idea, and you haven't studied at all. You haven't touched the books, you haven't looked over the material, and you pray that God will help you get smarter so you can ace that test. Is it wrong for you to doubt that God will help you get smarter and ace that test? I don't know. What do you think? How about this one? This one's fun. So you have a crush on somebody, and you have for over a year. Is it wrong to doubt that God's not going to make them fall in love with you in time for the dance or the prom coming up? Because that's probably what you've been praying for. Is it wrong to doubt that? Last one. This one's a little more heavy. You're stuck in a dangerous situation, and you pray that God gets you out of it so you can be safe. Is it wrong to doubt that God's going to get you through that situation? So some of these are not very serious. Some of them are more serious. But I'm guessing that you've experienced at least one of them. That's normal. It's normal to wonder, how far is it okay to doubt God? Is it okay to doubt God on the big things or the little things, or is it not okay on one or the other? These are things that we deal with all the time. So if you're in the chat right now, I want you to rate 1 through 10. How often do you have questions or maybe even doubts about God? 1 being not very often and 10 being, quite a bit, probably every day. I just want to get a feel for kind of where you're at personally, and I want you to know that this is totally normal. To be able to have questions in that way is okay. It's an okay thing. So, but this is the kind of stuff we're talking about today in our new series called Doubt It. So in our series called Doubt It, we're talking about if you've ever doubted God, or if you've ever questioned Him before. We're going to be looking at 2 different examples of people who have doubted God, and we're going to see what we can learn from them. Now, these examples come in a book of the Bible called Psalms, Psalms, Psalms. And what the Psalms are a series of songs written. Most of them are happy. Actually, that's not true. Not most of them. Some of them are happy and joyful and just praising God. And so people had this song that they could sing with music and words where they could be joyful and praising God. And then there were other psalms that were more heavy. They were sad. They were angry. They were lamentful. They were there for heartache in the hard times. There are some of them that are very hopeless. The first psalm I want us to look at, we're not going to read the whole thing, I shortened it for us, but it's Psalm 88. Yes, there are 88 psalms. Actually, there's over 100. There's a lot of them, for sure. Some of them are long, some of them are short. But we'll be looking at Psalm 88 and kind of looking at the tone. What is this author saying? What are they going through? What are they doing? So Psalm 88, starting in verse 3, says this. I am overwhelmed with troubles, and my life draws near to death. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I am like one without strength. I am set apart with the dead, like the slain who lie in the grave, whom you remember no more, who are cut off from your care. You have put me in the lowest pit, in the darkest depths. Your wrath lies heavily on me. You have overwhelmed me with all your waves. You have taken from me my closest friends and have made me repulsive to them. I am confined and cannot escape. My eyes are dim with grief. Wow. So this author of this psalm really made their feelings clear. This is some really heavy stuff. This psalm has an attitude towards God. It's a little bit of anger, it's a little bit of sorrow, it's a little bit of sadness. It's a little bit of, there is no hope here. There is nothing in his future that is good. There is nothing that is going well. Now, maybe some of you identify with this. Some of you read this and you're like, yeah, I feel that right now too. Man. Did any of this psalm make you uncomfortable? Well, was any of it hard to hear? Well, was any of it hard to read? I mean, being put in the darkest pit is a graphic imagery. There's darkness there. There's some raw honesty in this psalm. The psalmist is wondering, is God even going to show up? Does God even care? Maybe God has abandoned me. And so there's not a happy ending in sight. This author feels like they're in the dark, that there is no hope. Now, I imagine that this must have been hard to write, but I hope that we can find a little bit of comfort in this. And the way we find that is by knowing that God doesn't expect us to always be happy and carefree. God's not looking at us saying, hey, you're not smiling, that means you're doing it wrong. Right? That's not what he's doing. He's saying that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to have things not going well, and you can feel free to talk about it. You don't have to pretend. You can show your doubts. You can show your fears. You can show your questions, because you're not going to offend God. That's why this is in the Bible, to show us that it's okay to just lay it all out there. You don't have to pretend to be okay all the time, because God's big enough to handle our frustrations and our disappointments and our fears, even our doubts. Now, we all have that one friend who finds it really easy to talk about whatever's going on in their life, right? They've got the good, they've got the bad, and it's just all out there. And I'm going to confess, I'm one of those a little bit. Not all the time, but I tend to just share what's going on in my life. Sometimes that's helpful, but other times it's real annoying, right? We kind of know that person. Well, it reminds me of someone from arguably one of the best TV shows of all time, The Office. We all agree, it's fine. But here I'm going to show you a video of some Michael Scott quotes, except they're put in a different context of different Bible stories. Take a look.
Snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap.
I understand nothing.
No! God, please, no! 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 I am in excuse! I love this woman! The stress of my modern office has caused me to go into a depression. I'm gonna kill myself!
You cheated on me when I specifically asked you not to?
I declare bankruptcy!
I am running away from my responsibilities.
I feel like all my kids grew up and then they married each other.
I have cause. It is because I hate him.
Where are the turtles? Where are they?
Would I rather be feared or loved? Easy, both. I want people to be afraid of how much they love me.
You gotta love it. I want people to be afraid of how much they love me. Quote, God. I'm just kidding. He didn't actually say that. But I think that's a great example of someone who just kind of shares what's on their mind, right? Michael Scott is a guy who, when things are going bad, he can really get down in the dumps, right? But for him, there's always something to look forward to. And that's kind of the tone of this second example, the second psalm that I want us to look at today. Things are bad. Things are still really bad. They're just as bad as they are in the other one. But there's a different kind of thing being said. So let's take a look at this together. Psalm 22. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from my cries of anguish? My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer. By night, but I find no rest. Yet, you are enthroned as the Holy One. You are the one Israel praises. In you our ancestors put their trust. They trusted, and you delivered them. To you they cried out and were saved. In you they trusted and were not put to shame. Do you guys hear that little bit of switch in there? It switches over. At the very beginning, there's this deep darkness. My God, why have you forsaken me? And then it turns. And there's this promise. There's this remembering what God has done in the past. In you our ancestors put their trust. They trusted, and God, you delivered them. There's this darkness happening now. But he's saying that there is hope. There is a future. There is something coming next that's good. And actually, some of you, if you've been around the church for very long, you've probably recognized the first line that says, my God, why have you forsaken me? You recognize that because those are the same words that Jesus says when he's on the cross dying. And most of us read that or we hear the story and we're like, Jesus is feeling dark. He's feeling down in the dumps. Why? Because he's dying, right? He's being put to death. That's a really bad thing. God, why have you forsaken me? But it's actually more than that. In Jewish culture, when an individual would start saying the beginning words of a psalm, every single Jewish person had these memorized. So when Jesus said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Every Jewish person in the area remembered the rest of the psalm. They remembered the darkness, and then they remembered the promises that God gives afterwards. They remember the hopelessness, and then they remember the hope that God is still acting in our world, that there is still good going on. And that shows us that even on the cross, even as Jesus was feeling separated from God, Jesus recognized the hope that God gives the world. That's a big deal. That even in our suffering, even when we are in dark places, that there is hope for us. Now, I hope you see that doubts and questions can happen in different ways, right? So in Psalm 88, the first one we read, that the psalmist seemed to blame God for their situation. They're in the darkness, and they're saying, God, you took my life away from me. There's this blame kind of being put there. Their cries to God, their doubts are hopeless. But then the second one, they're still feeling abandoned, but they're recognizing hope. In the middle of their pain, they're still able to trust in God's faithfulness. Now, isn't it reassuring for you and me that when we have questions about God, when we have our doubts, when we have the things that aren't going well, that we don't have to follow a formula, right? We don't have to do things a very specific way. We don't have to show our doubts in a specific way. We don't have to pretend. We can be real with each other, and we can be real with God about what's going on with us. No, I've said this many times, but I wanted to say it again. I want OHC Youth. I want our youth group to be a place where we can trust each other enough that we can know that this is a safe place to ask questions. You don't have to feel weird about not having all the answers. But you can say, hey, I've got questions and I've got doubts right now. I'm angry and I feel dark and I feel like God's taken things away from me. And you don't have to hide that from me. Yeah, I'm a pastor. That means you can trust me with it because I'm not going to judge you. Because I understand that just like these examples from the Bible, that we all go through these things. So I hope that when you're in pain, when you have questions, when you doubt, when you feel hopeless, you can be real and say, this is where I'm at, and I'm struggling with it. And now, I don't know what doubts you have now. I don't know what doubts you're going to have in the future. But here's what I do know. That when doubts come up, I hope you remember that like Jesus, you're not alone. You are not alone in your questions. You're not alone in your doubts or your pain or your frustration. That's my main point, that you are not alone in your questions. Now, I know a lot of us, we feel alone when we have questions, when we have doubts. We feel like we're not allowed to feel these things. We're not allowed to share them. We're not allowed to talk about them because we feel weird, right? We feel like we're letting God down. We're letting our friends down. We're letting our family down. Maybe we even feel like we're letting ourselves down because life doesn't look the way we wanted it to. But it's okay because you're not alone. We all have these questions. We all have these doubts. For me in my life, I've always had this weird nagging feeling in the back that as I'm discovering what my belief in God looks like, I have this fear that I'm doing it wrong, that I'm not figuring it out the right way, that I'm not smart enough to believe in God, that I don't have enough faith to believe in God. And you know what? That's okay. Because those doubts have caused me to look towards God, to turn towards Jesus in a new way, and discover that his love for me is deeper than I ever imagined. And I believe that if you have questions and doubts, if you choose to lean in, to ask those questions even if it feels weird, that God's going to honor that. That he's going to help your curiosity grow and turn it into something good and into something beautiful. Because I want you to know that there is so much hope for you. There's a lot of situations that you can end up in that we doubt God, that we wonder if God can really get us through these situations. Now, I don't know when the questions are going to come up in your life. I don't know what kind of doubts there are. But all I know is that they're going to come up. And when they do, I hope you know that you're not alone in your questions. You're not alone. Let's pray to God together. Remember, when we pray, we're simply just talking to God. I say, let's bow our heads and let's close our eyes out of respect for God, but really, none of that matters. What matters is what you're doing. Is if you're talking to God, even in your own mind, that's good enough. So please pray with me. God, you are good. Thank you for a chance to see these examples of people experiencing doubts in their life. Thank you for the chance to see that we don't have to have everything all together. That we can be honest about our questions and about our doubts, that you're big enough to handle it. That you won't turn us away when we doubt. God, help us to be curious and to ask good questions. I pray this in your name. Amen. So this week, I actually had a question pop up on our Discord channel. And I thought it was a really good question that I wanted to address it here during youth group. So again, we're talking about doubts. And questions tie deeply into our doubts. So you might ask, is God real? Is Jesus actually good? Did Jesus actually come back to life? What about the Bible? What does the Bible say about these different things? The Bible can be really confusing sometimes. And so if you've ever had questions about these things or anything else about your faith, about God, I want to hear them. And so you can go ahead and send them to me in the chat. You can send them to my email address, ryan@oakhavenchurch.org. Just in case you don't know, it's also on our website. Or you can go ahead and post them in our Discord channel. I have a channel just for big questions. But I have a big question I want us to bring up. So let's go over to our big questions. I don't have the video in there. Oh, well. What do? That's life. I put so much time into that, too. All right, so as part of the slides that I put together with the verses and stuff, I have the question that was asked earlier this week, and here's what it is. In Revelation 20:14, it says, "Then death and Hades will be thrown into the fire." Why is Hades mentioned here and not Satan? So if I'm getting this question correctly, this is really a question about who or what is Hades. Like what is that word or phrase? Like what does that mean? Why is that here? And so I had to go back to Revelation and read it for myself. And so what's happening here is that God is judging people. Like, so people were good or bad, and kind of the final judgment is happening. And either people are saved and they get to be with God forever, or they get thrown into the fire. And that's kind of a scary theme. But as we read it, we see verse 14 says, "Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire." And so that makes it sound like Hades is like a person. When the Bible talks about Hades, it's actually talking about a place. So where does somebody go after they die? So in the New Testament, when it says Hades, they go to, that's where the people go after they die. Most people attribute it to hell. There's kind of a separation between the good and bad side. That's what it talks about. In the Old Testament, there's a Greek word called Gehenna. And it essentially means the same thing. They didn't have as much understanding of what happened in the afterlife, but that was the place where people go when they die. So I had to do a little more reading because I got confused when I read this too. So Noah Anderson, a really good question. But then I figured it out. Because what happened earlier is Satan got set free for a short amount of time, finally judged, and then thrown into the lake of fire. So Satan's already there in the fire. That's already done and gone. And then what's happening is God is resurrecting every single dead person out of death, out of Hades. And so there's kind of a metaphor happening here. So where death gets thrown into the fire because there's no more dead people. Everybody gets raised up. And then Hades gets thrown into the fire because there's no one else there. It's an empty place. There's no one left in Hades. And then the final judgment happens, where the people who, this is the gospel. This is why I'm a youth pastor. Everybody deserves to go into the fire. We've all done wrong things. We all rebel against God. We do things against others. We do things against God. We do things against ourselves. And so we deserve to get thrown into the fire. But God made a way that not all of us have to get tossed. That when we trust in Jesus Christ, we forge a relationship with God. God writes our names in what he calls the book of life. And when that resurrection happens, everybody whose name's written in the book of life gets saved. And so that's kind of where the judgment is happening. So Hades is a place, not a person. I think the confusion is kind of the Greek mythology. There's a god named Hades, little g, God. So I hope that answers the question. I hope that was a little interesting. If there's any big questions that you have about the Bible or about your faith, please let me know. I'd love to answer them on a future segment of Big Questions. So at this point, I'm going to just finish up with our announcements. We're going to take a break from music time for a little bit while I kind of figure out the strategy for what we're doing and where we're going in the future. So as you know, there's a handful, you may have seen this on Instagram, there's actually a handful of high schoolers milling about. And they have a chance to be here in person. And I know some of you want to be here in person too. So I'm creating a rotation. We're still working out exactly how the rotation works. But next Wednesday, if you are in Joyce and Sari's small group, you are invited to join us here at Oak Haven Church in our youth room during our live stream. So we'll set up some chairs for you. You can be here. We'll play it safe, right? We need to be 6 feet apart. Let's do that. But if you're in Joyce and Sari's small group, you're invited to be here in person next Wednesday. I'll be sending some more information out to your parents via email. Most likely, you will be welcome to join us starting at around 5:30 p.m. You should know that this Sunday there will be no breakfast club. I'm actually preaching on Sunday, so for Oak Haven Church, so at the 9 o'clock and the 11 o'clock service. So if you're interested in coming to church, go ahead and sign up online. I'd love to have you come and support me as I preach. I love seeing your faces here on Sundays. But as a result, there will be no breakfast club on Sunday morning. I'm just not able to make that happen and preaching happen at the same time. That is all our main announcements. So moving on, we'll be jumping into our Zoom time. So I just want to thank you for joining us here at OHC Youth. I value you so much. I want you to know that God loves you. He has a plan for your life, and He's okay with all of your questions. If you're part of our group, stick around. I'll be throwing the Zoom link in the chat in just a minute. And if you're not part of our group, either you're watching live, jump on Zoom with us. We'd love to meet you. But if you're watching this later, thanks for tuning in. I hope that you had a chance to connect with God, and I hope you had a chance to just get to know us just a little bit better. Thanks for being here for OHC Youth Live, and I'll see you next week. See ya!
would welcome me. I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last, he has ransomed me. His grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. Who the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am who you say I am. Who the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. can see in your eyes, dear. It's hard to take for a moment more. We've got to burn the ships, cut the ties, send a flare into the night. Say a prayer, turn the tide, dry your tears and wave goodbye. Step into a new day. We can rise up from the dust and walk away. We can dance upon the heartache, yeah. So light a match, leave the past, burn the ships, and don't you look back. Don't let it arrest you. This fear of falling again. And if you need a refuge, I will be right here until the end. Oh, it's time to burn the ships, cut the ties, send a flare into the night. Say a prayer, turn the tide, dry your tears and wave goodbye. Step into a new day. We can rise up from the dust and walk away. We can dance upon the heartache, yeah. So light a match, leave the past, burn the ships, and don't you look back. So long to shame, walk through the sorrow, out of the fire, into tomorrow. So flush the pills, face the fear, feel the weight disappear. We're coming clean, we're born again. Our hopeful lungs can breathe again. Oh, we can breathe again. And step into a new day. We can rise up from the dust and walk away. We can dance upon the heartache, yeah. So light a match, leave the past, burn the ships, and don't you look back. And don't you
sent your son down and set me free. Everything of this world will fade. I'm pressing on till I see your face. I will live that your will be done. I won't stop till your kingdom come. 'Cause you are my freedom. We lift you higher, lift you higher. Your love, your love, your love, never ending. Oh, oh, oh. You are alive in us. Nothing can take your place. You are all we need. Your love has set us free. Oh, oh, oh. You are my freedom. We lift you higher. You are my freedom. We lift you higher, lift you higher. Your love, your love, your love, never ending. Oh, oh, oh. You are alive in us. Nothing can take your place. You are all we need. Your love has set us free. You are alive in us. Nothing can take your place. You are all we need. Your love has set us free. Oh, oh, oh. Oh, oh, oh. You make the darkness run and hide. You bring the broken back to life. Only you can, only you can. You set me free from every chain. You fill my heart with songs of praise. Only you can, only you can. Jesus, you're the only reason that I'm even breathing. I am wide awake. My heart beats only for your glory. My hands reach up for you to hold. only for your glory. My hands reach up for you to hold me. My soul sings, Father, you are holy. My feet dance to rhythm, to rhythm. Every beat is calling, every beat is calling out your name. Oh, every beat is calling, every beat is calling out your name. Yeah, every beat is calling, every beat is calling out your name.
You were the word at the beginning, one with God, the Lord Most High. Your hidden glory in creation, now revealed in you are Christ. What a beautiful name it is! What a beautiful name it is! The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a beautiful name it is. Nothing compares to this. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus.
Ryan Andrews Show.
You didn't want heaven without us, so Jesus, you brought heaven down. My sin was great, your love was greater. What could separate us now? What a wonderful name it is. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a wonderful name it is. Nothing compares to this. What a wonderful name
souls with smiling faces, fighting for surrender, for now and the after, yeah. Just look around and you see that people are scared to say how they really feel. Oh, we all need a little honesty, yeah. You are love. If your heart's in 1,000 pieces, if you're lost and you're far from reason, just look up, know you are loved. Just look up, know you are loved. When it feels like something's missing, if it hurts but you can't find healing, just look up, know you are loved. Just look up, know you are loved. We're not made to be superheroes, photoshopped, all size zeros, a light not expected, but not quite perfected, yeah. Look up, see the sun is shining, there's hope on a new horizon, calling you, it's calling you. Are love. If your heart's in 1,000 pieces, if you're lost and you're far from reason, just look up, know you are loved. Just look up, know you are loved. When it feels like something's missing, if it hurts but you can't find healing, just look up, know you are loved. Just look up, know you are loved. You don't have to prove yourself. Don't try to be someone else. You don't have to prove yourself. Don't try to be someone else. You are loved. You are loved. Just look up, know you are loved. Just look up. You are loved. If your heart's in 1,000 pieces, if you're lost and you're far from reason, just look up, know you are loved. Just look up, know you are loved. When it feels like something's missing, if it hurts but you can't find healing, just look up, know you are loved. Just look up, know you are loved. If your heart's in 1,000 pieces, if you're lost and you're far from reason, just look up, know you are loved. Just look up, know you are loved. When it feels like something's missing, if it hurts but you can't find healing, just look up, know you are loved. Just look up, know you are loved.
Though the tears may fall, my song will rise, my song will rise to you. Though my heart may fail, my song will rise, my song will rise to you. While there's breath in my lungs, I will praise you, Lord. In the dead of night, I'll lift my eyes, I'll lift my eyes to you. Though the waters rise, I'll lift my eyes, I'll lift my eyes to you. While there's hope in this heart, I will praise you, Lord. The joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord is my strength. In the darkness I'll dance, in the shadows I'll sing. The joy of the Lord is my strength. When I cannot see you with my eyes, let faith arise to you. When I cannot feel sorrow comes my way.